Hello, everybody. My name is Roberto Vitón, and I'm the founder and director of Valoral Advisors, an investment advisory firm that is based in Luxembourg, and it's specialized in food and agriculture investments. I would like to say thank you today to the U.S. Soybean Export Council for putting this program together, and also for inviting me to join you in this session. I know that we are in special times, so I hope that all of you are staying safe and healthy. As I said, I'm very glad to be here today. During this program, we have been hearing about crop outlooks. We have been hearing also about different discussions on supply and demand projections and other relevant matters and trends on our sector. What I would like to do with you today and in the next 20 minutes is to share with you an investment perspective about the global food and ag investment sector. Hopefully, when we look at how the investments in the sector are structured, and then we look at also some of the trends and opportunities going forward, and especially the relevant areas for the livestock sector in Asia, I was saying hopefully this will be useful for your business. When we think about investing in the food and ag sector, we can think about the broad food and ag value chain. We know this is massive, and we have multiple sectors and activities. This slide provides a simple view of the value chain where we have the upstream area, including all the input companies, and this includes also equipment, service companies that are providing solutions to the farmers and growers. We also have the midstream area in the value chain where we have all the processing companies, the traders, and all the food companies. And finally, we have the downstream area where we have distributors and retailers and the consumers. So this is a way that we can use to think about how to invest in the sector. Now, let's put some numbers in terms of the investment flow in the sector over the last years. Now, what you will see in this slide is a chart that shows the evolution in the number of investment funds specialized in food and agriculture. What you can see is that back in 2005, there were only around 40 funds investing globally, while in 2020, we are already counting over 600 funds. This really shows how investors have been attracted to the sector and to the attributes that the sector offers. In fact, we see today that there are three main investment strategies. The first one is farmland, what we usually think about primary production, including row crops like soybeans, but also permanent crops, livestock, and so on. We have a second area, which is the private equity strategy, and which is really all the investments in operating businesses along the food and ag value chain. And finally, we have venture capital investments, which are connected to all the ag tech and food tech innovation that you are all aware of. So really, since the early of 2000, we have seen the emergence of the food and ag sector as an asset class. And we will also show you now how these assets have been distributed geographically, but also across asset strategies. So at the moment, these 600 funds or so that we are tracking are managing assets in total of $102 billion. As you can see, over 50% of these assets are actually invested in the North America, mainly the US. And this shows that the US remains a powerhouse in terms of food production and food exports, and we expect that this will continue for the foreseeable future. We also see some of the investments obviously going into other regions. In terms of the asset strategies, we see that the majority of the assets are invested either in farmland or private equity, which is not surprising as most of the investments are really targeting the primary production and then all the processing and distribution. I would also say that some of the other strategies, notably all the venture capital investments, have been growing recently as investors recognize that technology will become a major driver to make the food and ag sector more sustainable and more efficient. Now, we can also talk a little more about where this capital is coming from. In this slide, you will see the different investor segments that we have in our space, private investors like high net worth individuals and family offices that have been increasingly attracted to the food and ag sector. They see it as an opportunity to diversify as part of their portfolios. And we also see institutional investors. This is really probably the largest pool of capital in our sector, and includes pension funds, insurance companies, endowments and foundations, even sovereign wealth funds, and other investors. We also see other investor segments like banks who are investing their own capital sometimes in our sector. We have corporate investors, notably agricultural trading houses, many of them coming from Asia as well. We see public agencies, of course, including development finance institutions, and finally, mission-driven investors, including church endowments, non-profit entities, and especially impact firms. More and more investors recognize that the food and ag sector can provide not only financial returns, but also positive outcomes associated to the improvements that can be driven in terms of environmental and social benefits. Now, looking forward, it is interesting to think about where the opportunities will lie in our sector. So one way to do this is to apply a thematic investing approach. If you're not used to this approach, it's really about identifying some of the long-term structural trends that might shape a sector, in this case, the food and ag sector, and then thinking about the different investment themes that arise from those trends, and finally identifying specific opportunities that provide exposure to those themes and trends. This is especially a very suitable approach for the food and ag sector, given all the different themes that we have. Now, I will not go in detail into this slide. You can read it later on. But what I would like to do is really highlight a few things about these four major trends that we have. First of all, in terms of the supply side, we have the climate change and scarce natural resources. And this is really about how not only climate change, but other factors involving human development are affecting the resources we have to produce food. So you can think about the loss of arable land, land degradation, constraints on water availability. There is a second area which we call the changes in demographics and social change. And this is really about the demand side and all the changes coming from the consumers. Here, there are many trends that are particularly very evident in Asia. And we can think about inform and empower consumers. We can think about the growth in population, the rapid urbanization in emerging markets. We also see more health awareness and environmental awareness, and so on. There is a third area which is really connected to the geopolitics and how they affect the food and ag sector that we call changing economic power and the rise of emerging markets. This is particularly, again, very relevant in Asia because we see a lot of this economic growth happening right there. And at the same time, this is a region that depends a lot on global trade. So you can think a lot of the trends and themes that are connected to this. And finally, technological breakthrough. Technology and innovation, broadly speaking, is something that is shaping all industries, not just the food and ag sector. It's actually a trend that is really transversal to all the other trends. We think that there are a lot of innovations that are coming to our sector and that will have impact going forward. So, as I said, this is really a tool that can help you to work on the long-term opportunities in our sector. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize the impact of COVID-19, potentially the implications that it has in our sector. And you might have read a lot about the impact of COVID-19 on our sector. I would not touch on that at the moment, but I would rather focus on the lasting investment implications. And I have really identified here four for you today that I would like to mention briefly. The first one is what we call local production closer to consumer. Many of the disruptions created by COVID-19 and by the response by governments mean that having flexible production, not only primary production, but also processing closer to the consumers is an advantage, is a benefit, and we think that this will stay there. In fact, we have seen it before with all these developments of greenhouses, vertical farms. So the second one, the second takeaway we have is about the acceleration of automation and digitalization. Again, this is something that you might have seen also broadly in our lives, in our jobs, how technology has come closer and how adoption is accelerating. We think that this is something that will happen in our sector as well. It will really accelerate the adoption in many cases, but also bring further innovation in terms of technologies. A third takeaway is really about the increased scrutiny on food safety. This is relevant in particular in terms of the livestock sector because of the connection between animal pathogens and human health. We have seen already increasing interest and demand by consumers, by food retailers, and generally by many stakeholders in our sector to request increased transparency, increased visibility of food along the supply chain. And I think that here, hopefully, there are many technologies that can help in this sense. And finally, I would say that once COVID-19 is over, we will see renewed efforts on sustainability. You know, probably the climate change and the impact of climate change is really the big elephant in the room, as our sector is particularly affected by the negative impact of climate change. And also, as a sector, we are responsible to provide solutions to make the food and ag sector not only more efficient, but also more sustainable. Now, I would like to highlight some of the specific opportunities we have in mind for the livestock sector in Asia. So the first one I want to highlight today is what we call livestock technologies. As you might be aware, the wave of ag tech and food tech innovation all around the world is not stopping. It's actually growing. We see thousands of startups developing new technologies. And one of the sectors where we see a growing number of innovations is the livestock sector. Either if it's for cattle, for poultry, or for pork, we believe that we are still in the early innings of seeing more and more innovation coming to the production facilities, and also in terms of improving productivity, improving food safety, while maintaining and improving animal welfare standards. I think, at least from the feedback we get from investors, that animal welfare is a critical theme, and many of the technologies we see are trying to bring solutions in this sense. But also, I think there are innovations happening in terms of different feed solutions. Now, the other opportunity I want to mention is automation in food processing. I have to say that from an investor angle, anything that has to do with food processing, and particularly equipment and automation in production lines for food processing, is something that has not been historically in the radar. Probably because it's something that is happening, inside the plants, and it's not so evident. But for anybody that is in the food processing business, we all recognize that making that process more efficient, more reliable, involves bringing more automation. And again, luckily here, we have new technologies that are helping. We have seen particularly technologies associated to computer vision to improve different processes in the food lines. But we think generally that we will see more investments in this space. Another investment opportunity that it's becoming more and more relevant is what we call food certification and food safety assurance. This is something that has been gaining more attention since the COVID-19 outbreak and the particular link between animals and human health. But as I said before, this connects broadly to all the food supply chain. So when we think that stakeholders are demanding increasing transparency, increasing visibility of how food is handled all along the food supply chain, we have to ask ourselves what we can do about this. And based on what we have seen so far, definitely this is an area where technology can also provide solutions. Probably many of you have seen how the use of different sensors and different tracking devices can help in this way. Moreover, there are a growing number of solutions based on blockchain that are improving traceability. There are obviously different solutions for different areas of the food supply chain, and also depending on the type of food that we talk about. But we believe that we will see growing focus on this sector and in this need. Finally, I would like to mention another area of opportunity, which we call it sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. Demand for animal protein has been growing, and it is projected to continue growing on absolute terms, definitely with a lot of growth coming from emerging markets. Some of this animal protein will come from fish increasingly. And Asia is today already a major producer, especially with a growing production in aquaculture. So there are increasing pressures to make aquaculture more sustainable. And this has to do with the way that water resources are used, with the way fish are raised, with the way that feed is used, and in other many ways. So we see investors becoming also more conscious and more interested in investing in solutions to make fisheries and aquaculture more sustainable and more efficient at the same time. So think about the new production systems like recirculating aquaculture systems, or think about the new technologies that are included in the traditional aquaculture equipment, new sensors, new feed solutions, and generally other technologies that can help. We have seen this particular sector growing in importance in North America, in Europe, and we are already seeing some investment activities happening across Asia. So I hope that you find this interesting. Now, with this opportunity, I will finish the presentation. As I mentioned before, as you can see, there are multiple investment opportunities that are connected to the trends that we discussed today. I hope that this broad overview helps you to understand the food and ag sector as an investment space, and hopefully that can connect to your business. I will be available in the next panel to discuss further and also to share more insights. Thank you so much for your time today.